the time has come to resume the program. In the Innovative City Forum 2022, we will have a discussion which will be moderated by Dr. Takenaka and joined by Dr. Ichikawa, Mr. Nanjo, and Dr. Ito. Takenaka-san, please. Thank you very much. This is a closing session for the Innovative City Forum, and it's always a difficult challenge. We had 3 outstanding presentations today, and I don't know what can be common ground for discussions in the session. So from your own perspectives, I would like everyone to make a proposal. Web3 could be a good case in point for people as well as for people in the technology. Could be for anyone. Please talk about proposal for Tokyo. Could be a proposal for the Tokyo Metropolitan Government for the players as well. In terms of art, it could be for the art people or the cultural agency. I would like the 3 panelists to talk about proposal. So it doesn't have to be limited to one. You can make as many proposals you wish. So let's go in the order of the presentations. So Ito-san, please. Bauhaus was created 100 years ago, Industrial Revolution, as well as mass production. Enabled new designs, new buildings to be visualized. New materials and new technologies can bring about such changes. Digital is also similar. With the digitalization, the same activity, digitalization is taking place, but with digitalization and Web3, what can be enabled will undergo change. And now the new architecture, new price, and new materials can be considered. What can be enabled by using different materials has to put into practice. If glass and steel, high-rise buildings was created because of the materials, but in terms of Web3, you still do not understand, so you have to put it into practice. It may not be useful today, but Web3 and digital understanding will be required, whether we politicians or citizens, and legal experts and others will have to think about this. For digital was outsourced, but it should be internalized increasingly. Architects have to know the materials. By the same token, digital must be fully understood in order to utilize this. Ito-san is also advisor to the digital agency. To leave no one behind in terms of digitalization is being promoted by Ito-san. So putting it into practice is very important. But as we start using it, the technology advancing forward. So that is the challenge, but it has to be done. Ichikawa-san, over to you. Takenaka-san asked to come up with a proposal. It's not easy to do. Frankly speaking, Tokyo has become very attractive over the years. I'm overwhelmed. So I've been living in Tokyo for about 70 years. I'm in the baby boomer. So there were the recovery of Japan after decline. So I'm truly amazed. Now, how we have to consider why this was enabled. It's somewhat of a mystery. We all work together to create the city. And according to the survey that we have made, we have a good ranking globally as well. So enhancing the attractiveness has been the theme of ICF. We have discussed various topics, and there was nothing surprising. But with the COVID pandemic, because Tokyo is so centralized, many people said that this is going to be the end of Tokyo because we are vulnerable to pandemics. But that was not the case. 2 years on, we have found out that Tokyo is a city that is becoming attractive because people gather together. And the sustainability challenge will be overcome as well. So the way forward is not a proposal by one individual. It is being proposed by everyone. Whether it is feasible or not must be considered. A certain direction might be necessary, but Tokyo is now being developed as a collaboration, not deliberately working together, but it's bringing to bear different type of tower. Whether this is sustainable or not will be the issue. Whether this is, but the concern I have, whether we can stay on this road, this course going forward. The core of decision making is not clear, but Tokyo is developing nevertheless. I think it's the same for the Japanese economy as well. Goto Shinpei has come up with a plan, but only 1/10 have been implemented, and we are utilizing what has been created. We need something akin to this core. Now for art, Nanjo-san, please. So I already want to go into discussion with the point being made. So yes, let's have an interactive discussion. Goto Shinpei, who is going to decide? According to my view, William Collis published Project Japan. It's a very voluminous book. It said that in the 1960s, the Japanese architects' metabolism architecture movement is taken up. The reason why he was interested is because Japan at that time had outstanding bureaucrats, and they were developing the cities. Working together with the bureaucrats, architects were able to realize their dreams. So it was a very happy time for them. That was in the 1960s in Japan. Subsequently, bureaucrats became weaker, and it has been taken over by commercialism. That's the point being made in the book. I'm sure that there are opposing views, but please continue. I don't know if it is a good follow-up, but in the context of what I've been discussing today, in order to make Tokyo into a city with identity, I think ultimately it boils down to culture. So how can culture become rich and with an edge and attractiveness? And to enable such an environment is what is required. It's not just one environment that is required. There could be more museums compared to London and Paris. We don't have many museums, art museums in Japan. There are specialized museums in Paris as well as London. There are technology museum, different genre museums exist. But in Tokyo, there is a lack of museums, a lack of galleries, where there is a shortage of everything. Same for music as well as theater. It's not just about a place, but the operation must be flexible, and for the users, it must easy to use. So bureaucratic management should be done away with. The user's perspective is necessary in rule making. That will become increasingly important. Also, taxation is having an impact as well. We are being taxed in various areas. We can't say that we should not be taxed, but listening to collectors outside of Japan, they are calling for more simple, easy to understand a system for the artists as well as the museums. There are rules in place, but it doesn't exist in Japan. It's only for the high net worth people. That is how it is perceived. There has to be more private sector museums. There's a lack of museums for the national government and municipal government. Work and effort will not suffice. There should be more entrustment to the private sector, providing advantage as well, so it will prosper and thrive further. So there are many areas where we can make improvements, but the rule makers is the challenge. So what can we do? Education is required. Unfortunately, for education to change, we need 2 generations or 3 generations. But we have to change education. Culture is important. This is be emphasized in education. So we have to nurture bureaucrats who understand the importance of art. Rule makers must be increased in number. However, there is a problem. There are other issues. Who are going to educate these people? There are a shortage of people with that kind of perspective. There is a tendency to manage. So flexible ideas, perspectives are required. Educating children, give them the freedom to express. And there could be risk, but we should encourage them to express themselves, not to manage, but to let them try. And the result is what one should be accountable for. This kind of education is called for, and we need educators to enable such education. That's my view. So this is not really a solution, but I'm just pointing out the issue.
Thank you very much. And I want to ask on creativity later on, but before that, because you mentioned about rules and private sector, and I agree with you, the rules are important, but our donation taxation system is very rigid and there's a lot of constraints. But if you look at cultural budget, the cultural agency is about 100 billion yen, and that's only 1,000 yen per capita. And they actually used 17 trillion yen just to secure the beds at the hospital during COVID. So that's how the Japanese government allocates money. But if you look at how small the cultural budget is, I mean, I understand your point, but if you want to build a good city with art at the core, I think it's very challenging. Now, on top of that, so whatever we do, it's true that we need creativity in Web3. If we were to build a new system, if you want to enter the new world, we need creativity. If you want to make Tokyo more punky, more that's striking, then you need creativity. And you also mentioned about artists' ability to conceptualize. That's about creativity as well. And I think Japanese people, there are areas where I think it's very creative, but the other side, we just lack creativity. So there's a mixture of both. So how do you assess creativity? And if you have a suggestion or proposal for that. So let me start with Ichikawa-san. So I think there's a part of me that thinks that Japanese people don't really have creativity, but I don't know. I have to ask myself if it's really true or not, because I think it's related to education. You are all, very successful. So it is, from what I listen, you often understand yourself, you understand another culture. So traveling isn't enough, but I have gone to Anglo-Saxon Arabia and Latin Americas. If you go in China, when you live in these different places, you know that people think quite differently. And that in itself is very useful. So why is it that we lack creativity? Because if you look at the Japanese social structure, I don't know about pre-war, but after the war, if you do something that, so as nail that sticks out gets pounded, right? So if you do try to do something different from others, then you get constrained. And, like Korea, if you have a mechanism where if you really stick out, you want to really foster that, right? You need to have that in order to build more creativity. So how do you overcome that? I think it's, not just so much education. You need to go and learn about other countries, other cultures. So you should go outside. So, Japanese teachers, if they're teaching English, I think they should just go overseas and learn English and then come back and teach. So rather than to, I think we need a mechanism where the learners are able to experience, because education is difficult. I mean, we're teachers, but there's so many different levels and quality of people who teach. So if you think education will be helpful, that's an illusion, because you could actually make it worse. So you need to give an opportunity for learners to really experience and learn for themselves. I think that's creating that opportunity is the key. That's right. So that's all about diversity. Placing yourself in a different culture is extremely important. I can agree with that, even from my own experience. So in terms of creativity, Nanjo-san, what about you? You're the one that speaks up most on creativity. This is what I think. I don't want to be like a flag bearer of art, but I think we really need to do art education more solidly, because art is an only curriculum or course or subject where you can have a different answer from everyone else. For example, math, you need to have the right answer, and you're basically always feeling intimidated and feeling like you're threatened to always come up with the correct answer. When I go to the university and speak about art, I say this is the perspective. You can think in this, how you can think about it. And students ask me, what is the correct way of thinking it? So even if you're in university, people ask me what's the correct way to look at it or to interpret it, but that's not the case. I say, you tell me what you think. And it seems as though that's completely missed out. And there's the issue of bullying. I think bullying is about, targeting someone in the group that is completely different from you. And it means that because you are so different. But in art, you can't be the same. In art, you have to be different from everyone else. And when you're different, that's when you first create something that's valuable. So in art education, this is a process where you are praised for being different, and you need people to experience that. So maybe for the first time, when you go through that process and you're able to experience that it's okay to be different, you will maybe be able to stop bullying and praise other people who are different. Drawing pictures is not just playing. It's really about educating people to think differently, to act differently. So that's right. We need to really reinforce that sort of function in the Japanese society. So what can we do? This is all related to, for example, teachers' licensing system. It's all interrelated. I mean, Nanjo-san, you write about this as well, but it's very difficult to change everything, so you have to think about where do you start. And that's still confusion, and people still don't know where to start. And in fact, creativity and technology is extremely important. So, Mr. Ito, what do you think? So in the age of mass production, we had people who would do the same thing. You needed that in war. As soldiers, you needed people in accounting firms. You needed that in the factories. So being able to do exactly what you were told to do were necessary in post-industrialization. So school was an organization for teach discipline to people to do what you were told to do. And what Nanjo-san was saying is, in this information age, we don't need a lot of people who do the same thing. We need people who do different things. Also, learning, it's not just learning textbooks at school. You can learn from the internet. So the school should be a place where people are taught to be diverse and to be different. But because the structure is so different, with an ordinary evolution, school will not change. So that's why Media Lab is trying to experience that. And this is about diversity as well. UN was saying that amongst even many countries, Japan is a country to eliminate people who are disabled. And if you go to Japanese school, it seems as though only ordinary people are in the world. And people who are not different, who are different, are basically eliminated from the society. This is true with all people with autistic as well. And in Japan, there's only 29 people who are autistic. At MIT, there's 98 people. And if the president started taking statistics, but they say that at Harvard, MIT, 60, 70 people are autistic. And people who are autistic, really excel in one area, and you push this one button, they excel so much they can go and win Nobel Prizes. Not everyone can win Nobel Prize, but I would say that most people who have won Nobel Prize are autistic or very close to autistic. So, you need to have people to be able to live a normal life. So that's why it's challenging, but subculture, small cities, even in several schools, we need to create a culture. Interesting paradox is that we say people are not creative. If you look at art in movies and other areas, if it's within the rule, they're very, very creative, and you can be diverse. So whether it be art, you can experiment and create a culture there. But I think this element of Japan where people like conservatism, people who like order, this is also very attractive about Japan, so we don't want to lose that either. I have one thing that came up to my mind as I listened. You think about roads, a way, the way of tea or a way of flower arrangement. I think that impact is very big because you're within this framework, but you are able to pursue your way. And you're able to basically reach this ultimate level. Now, if you jump out of that and go a completely different way, that's in principle is not allowed. And if you people actually do that, become someone like Urasenke, who built this fact for tea ceremony. So basically, to fundamentally change things is something that we don't see very often. Maybe Rikyu was one man who really did something completely different. He could actually to overturn the value. But we do not really see many people like that, especially in the tea ceremony after Rikyu. I agree. I have been looking at the society in the U.S. and Japan, and I think that Japan, the fact that we were in isolation, has really impacted the Japanese culture, because isolation doesn't allow us to spread out, but we're within the scope, we're able to really pursue the way and excel in it and be creative. But if you expand the frontier, we're not able to accommodate. But in the United States, there's a Turner who is a very famous historian, but if you study history in the United States, you always have to learn. But, frontier was always there, and you have to continue to challenge that frontier. And of course, there's accountability to it. So we need to be aware of that, and that is why we need to make efforts in that area. I think that's the way of thinking we need. When I went to MIT for the first time, I wasn't able to read the professor's name. So Mr. Smith, I can read, but MIT was a place where people from diverse backgrounds were there, so I was not able to read the spelling of the name. So that's how diverse it is. Actually, we need to have more discussions.
Now, this is an innovative city forum. So let's talk about the city as well as lifestyle. The city is the attractiveness is aggregation, and that's why Tokyo is strong. And being the city center is of utmost importance with the prevalence of the internet coming to the fore. Friedman said that the world is flattening. Thomas Friedman, who wrote this book. So information is available anywhere in the world. That's the reason why the world is aggregation is not necessary. Centralization is not necessary. Now, this is also reflected in about working from home. But the conclusion is very simple. Real and virtual hybrid method is required. So how can we establish this hybrid way of working? Thinking about Tokyo as a city in terms of technology as well as from the point of view of art, the real and virtual combination is what we'd like to discuss. I'm from the local area, so I know the attractiveness of the outlying regions. The problem is cultural facilities. In Tokyo, there are museums, or maybe not enough, but you can go to concert. But in the outlying regional areas, you can't do that. So we have to have this exposure. Even if you're working remotely, people working in Connecticut is coming to Manhattan to enjoy the opera. So how can this hybrid be enabled? Because I think this is going to have a determining impact on the way we live and the way we work. Nanjo-san, what are your thoughts? In the regional areas, there are only one prefectural museum. There is a shortage of museums in the regions, in the outlying areas. But it will not suffice for government to take the lead in increasing just the number. There has to be a public and private collaboration. I think that is the better course to take. But in terms of management, it becomes very rigid if it's public. So a private sector should be involved in terms of the management of such facilities. The risk should be taken to try something interesting, which will bring people together and have an impact on the cycle. I think this cycle can be established better by the private sector rather than the public sector. Public sector should provide the pathway, but it should be decided and initiative should be taken by the private sector. There are some opposition to this thought, but I think that is better, according to my view. Obviously, this will not suffice. We have to revitalize the regional areas as well. A soft perspective is required. The more funding should be provided. So the museum should be allocated more significant budget, because they are like the general contractors of culture. So if you provide funding, the designers as well as publishers will also benefit. And to the culture industry, there will be circulation of funds. Public spending is only toward architecture, but to the soft adjacent industry should also benefit. Then it will benefit such industries in the regional areas as well. NFT, do you think it has a role to play? Inclusive of NFT, Web3 overall will enable remote work for artists as well. It will enable more activity. It will do away with the brokers or intermediaries. To establish an NFT can be sold anywhere. That's wonderful. And with NFT, it's not just one auction, but you can have a global auction. That is of utmost importance. As a result, what is very interesting is that people are coming to Japan and Tokyo, because Japan is good food, culturally interesting, and people want to come to Tokyo and Japan. So if you can do remote, you can have headquarters in Tokyo and other bases elsewhere. But NFT and Web3 is difficult to implement because of taxation issues. So if it's successful, they'll have to relocate to Singapore. With Internet, Web3 can enable hybrid work. And if this is enabled, everyone wants to come to Japan and Tokyo when we conduct a conference. There is, they all accept, because of COVID pandemic, there is pent-up demand to come to Tokyo because they were not able to travel in Tokyo. Social media, people are envious about what is taking place in Tokyo. So hybrid will enhance the power of Tokyo further. Now let's hear from Ichikawa-san, specialist of cities, regarding hybrid. You said that more edge is required. And what about Singapore and other competing cities? So please also address this point. So I will like to take up all these points mentioned. So I said that there are concerns about Tokyo, but there is always a few past and also comparison with other cities. when we look at the future of Tokyo, we can compare against others: New York, London, Paris. In Asia, Singapore, and Seoul are good comparisons. They are also promoting urban development. It is good reference for us, uniquely different to Tokyo. Which method can Tokyo pursue will depend on the mechanism we have today, so there's no easy answer. But London has been successful because of the London universities and government are working together. We are also providing support to Tokyo Metropolitan Government, but they're only one-off initiatives. Something is different. So against this backdrop, let me further elaborate. The creativity theme is important. This is also the same as whether it can truly bring to bear an edge for Tokyo. In city ranking, for the 6 functions that we evaluate, economy is weakening. But this is an effort to be made by the national government, not just Tokyo. Out of the 6 functions, culture and exchange can be enabled by Tokyo alone. We have been working together with Nanjo-san for 10 years. I'm always impressed by what you are emphasizing, and I am convinced that art is very important. So I'm fully convinced. And in fact, action has already been taken. It's not just by the government, but power of Tokyo, the source of power, is the combination of diversity in the private sector and also from foreigners coming as well. Even under COVID, Tokyo's real estate valuation is within the top 3 of the world. That is because the private sector and government can work together and provide a solution. It is shown in Tokyo. But private sector are all competitors. They do not want to cooperate. So what we did last year is for government and private sector to get together. And we created a platform so that we can combine our efforts to enhance the power of Tokyo and to make it more attractive. And the key word was culture. It's an international exchange, international cultural interaction is what we have named it. It's not exchange. Creativity is added. By creating this, the power of Tokyo can be enhanced because it's uniquely Tokyo. It can be done by Tokyo alone, and government does not have to be involved. We have started this last year, but inbound traffic has stopped because of COVID, and border measures will be alleviated. So whether we can provide something with an edge is very important. Global standard-wise, Tokyo is at the top level. And against this backdrop, we don't know what can be enabled. We are all similar. There is no uniqueness. We need more unique characteristics brought to bear. Otherwise, we cannot differentiate against Paris and London. So in this context, what do we have to do is represented in the digital museum in Odaiba. It became very popular. So people are coming from overseas, and their impressions will be very important. It's not just trial and error. It's not just groping in the dark. As Ito has mentioned, in Tokyo, there is virtual gathering in Tokyo. So there must be something special about Tokyo, and we have to identify that and to further develop it. That is the reason why we need to combine our efforts, not just government, but private sector as well, to go through trial and error. By so doing, we can truly come up with something unique.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's more to discuss, but because of the time constraints, we would like to take questions and comments from the floor. Please give us your name, and you can raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone over. Anyone? It's a great opportunity. Please feel free to ask questions. Then we have a person in the back raising hand. My name is Kato, and I'm at Loftworks. I'm a creativity director. So I'm 32 years old, and the city has been transformation for 50 years. And when I came to Tokyo for university, there were already many buildings, and the Scramble Square was being rebuilt again. In addition to hard redevelopment, how do you build a community of creators? And I think there's a need to really build that community. And there's a budget for my company, but there's a 100 billion culture agency budget, but there's a lot of culture startups which have been sort of cut off from this culture budget. So when you think about a community building in the future, is there anything you have to this situation? Thank you. So with the change of the society, with the city, there's a need for community, and in fact that community is expanding as well. So does anyone want to comment? I'm not sure if I understood the question well, but it's obvious that community is important, because NFT is really all about community, and the value of NFT is being preserved by the community, and that's true with art as well. The value of art. So, for example, if you say, for example, Michael Dushan, if someone says this is art, how many people would agree that this is art? So the size of the community is important, and the value of the digital world, or art, or any other activities, everything seems as though is becoming community-based, and we have to take that into account. That's my opinion. At Academyhills, this is Academyhills has been built with a vision of building a community for creativity. And I think a co-working space, and these are sort of the elements. The community is related to ranking, right? Yes. You mentioned about culture agency. When you talk about culture and culture agency, we always have to talk about history. For some reason, they talk about how we need to develop our culture in Japan. But I mean, that's okay, but the world is moving differently. The world is really talking about the combination of being digital and virtual with the culture. And I'm not denying what the Japanese government is saying, but there's a word yanaka or sendagi in this area. There's a lot of old buildings, and when you renovate it, it attracts people, and that's important. But if you focus too much on that, then when you talk about creativity in the future, that's only part of it. So I don't know if that's an issue of cultural agency, or maybe this is the policy of people who are promoting culture in Japan. So we have to think about what's happening in the digital reform. Maybe there's a need for a mindset. I think the cultural agency itself has been established to protect the old traditional culture. At least a few years ago, 90% of the budget was allocated for conservation and preservation. So they have not been able to make any investment into new culture assets. And we have JTA, Japan Tourist Agency. Relatively speaking, they need to capture cultural aspect as well. So this is related to the Urasenke earlier. If you're try to do something within a certain rule, determined rule, the people are creative, but that in itself is not interesting. But there was a kurumaza in the past, so there was the feudal lord, and there was a circle where people can come and talk about things freely. And so it's someone who is very, has a centralized power, builds and invites people to come in and gives this discussion for free space to discuss, and it works well. But this is like ICF, we're creating a place where all kinds of people can come and talk, whatever is fine. And you go to Shibuya, and there's all these people who are really sticking out. They come together. So if you try to do something within a rule that is very boring, then you will not be able to realize diversity. So what sort of concept would allow something new to be born? So you have to design. So this is related to Urasenke. Someone has to come in and intervene. It could be private, it could be academia, it could be government, but we need to create something, a new form somewhere in this age. I guess we have not been able to do that. I hope that was useful for you. So whatever you do, there's a concept leader that's necessary for that community to flourish. Okay, someone else? My name is Moroka from Bornex. Thank you very much for your valuable talk today. As I listened to you today, this is what I thought. I think art is all about redefining the prosperity of people's life. But of course, if you look at it from the technological aspect, how do you realize that? So you have both sides of what's realistic and what's not. So when you look at this from city, how do you connect those two aspects? So that was my opinion. That's my feedback. Now, it seems as though there's a big gap. There's a break between people who are art specialists, but they're not technology specialists. Technology specialists are not art specialists, but city is a place where people live. So how do we overcome that barrier, that big gap between the two? So we need to build a mechanism for that. And I think we need to challenge on that and overcome this gap. So entrepreneurship is necessary for both the big corps and also entrepreneurs as well. So we need that spirit of challenge. So this gap or this divide between the specializations, maybe you would disagree with me, but if you agree with me, how do we overcome that? I would like to hear your opinion on that. Thank you. So again, do we have that divide between the specialties here? I think we have improved quite significantly over the last 10 years. So Nanjo-san, do you want to answer on behalf? Just to give you a small example, in UK, there's a foundation which does with the owners of cultural heritage and digital technology, they, for 2 weeks, come together, and every day in the same room, they are not given even a theme. They just like start talking, and in the beginning, so the operators of cultural heritages facilities have no digital literacy, so they can't follow on at all. But the digital engineers, they don't know anything about culture. They can't talk about art. But if you put them together in the same room for 2 weeks, you begin to understand what the other is doing and what others desire. And they are able to discuss how do they apply digital technology in the cultural facilities. And I was quite impressed because there's a foundation that actually does that. So we need to think about things like that on an individual level. I see. Thank you. Ito-san, I think it was a few decades ago that I went to Boston, and MIT campus was very organic, but now it was very blank, I guess, Blake, I guess. But MIT is now filled with art. How did it change like that? I think they are very proactive. But in my case, in the Department of Agriculture, architecture is basically, I mean, you can't do it, architecture, unless you are able to do science and art and engineering at the same time. So I think it was important that they started from technology to art. So same thing that we talked about earlier. I think Japanese schools are all very siloed. So it's about how do you overcome that. That's why venture and artists, it's easier to start from that side. But one thing, Andre Tan said purpose-based learning. he was saying that if you work together for the good of the society, you can overcome, whether it be artists or engineers, they all come and participate. So if the society aims towards this same goal of wanting to make the society better, then you lose that barrier. That divide is no longer existent anymore. So Japan is not that stage yet, and that was what Audrey was suggesting that I think we should do in Japan. That really resonated well. Thank you very much. I've been teaching Shonan campus at Keio University, and there is an environment information department and also comprehensive sort of literature, fine arts. So there's both a fine arts side and there's an engineering side. So and it's all in one. And people ask whether this is humanities. So they say that even the humanities have become engineering, science school of engineering. So I think this sort of effort is necessary, like bringing people together in the same room for a long time. So unfortunately, we run out of time. I think we have been able to host this event as commemorating the 10th anniversary of Innovative City Forum. And we are planning to put this together into a book, publish a book. And it's all dependent on your efforts, but if it's published, I hope that you will read it. So please give the panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Takenaka sensei, Ichikawa sensei, and Nanjo-san, thank you very much. Please give them a big another round of applause. Thank you.